Following a backlash from Conservative MPs and ministers, Rishi Sunak has decided to continue with his plans to ban both gay and trans conversion therapy. The Prime Minister will include a draft bill in the King's Speech which will make it a criminal offence to attempt to change someone's sexuality and gender ideology in England and Wales. Campaigners have repeatedly called for conversion therapy to be banned, saying it has ruined lives with attempts to cure LGBT plus people of being themselves. However, there are serious questions about whether this would impede the ability of practitioners to treat those suffering with gender dysphoria, owing to the unclear definition of conversion therapy. Well, I'm now joined by a veteran LGBT rights campaigner and one of the bravest campaigners for political rights in the country, Peter Tatchell. Peter, thank you for coming in. The difficulty with this, and you've always defended free speech as well, is how do you draw the dividing line between protecting free speech but protecting people to lead the lives they want without undue interference?
Well, we don't know the precise wording of the legislation, but the reports coming out is that it will only criminalise coercive conversion practices. In other words, abusive, threatening, intimidating and physically violent
but they're
conversion.
Certainly physically violent ones are already illegal. So the question is, what is it actually doing, or is it just one of these token bills that repeats what's already in law, which is something that governments do periodically?
Well, when you're being held and shouted at, abused and insulted...
That's illegal, but that's illegal already.
It's not technically illegal. It's a grey area. It's a grey area. And that's why all the world's leading professional bodies, medicine, psychiatry and counselling, say that these practices are abusive, they're harmful, and they're very damaging. But
if you're being held and shouted at, that is illegal. That is an assault to hold somebody. The law's already there. It becomes more the question of what is a father allowed to say to his child if that child, possibly as a young teenager, expresses a view of wanting to change gender. And creating that sort of uncertainty, I think, is very difficult.
Well, first of all, let me say that people are being held, abused,
OK, but that is already illegal.
But it's not enforced. Okay, it happens. It is not enforced.
OK, but shoplifting...
It happens in churches and places of worship all across the country.
But shoplifting isn't being enforced either. The fact we're not enforcing the law doesn't mean you need new laws. It means you need to enforce the law that exists. And I wouldn't disagree with you on that at all. That if people are being coerced, of course, there are laws to cover that and those should be enforced. It's just why you need a specific law that seems to be, from what one's hearing, to go further than that, to make conversations potentially a grey area. And that becomes very difficult.
That will definitely not happen. There's absolutely no doubt that no one wants to prevent parents or teachers speaking to young people about sexual orientation or gender identity issues. That will not be covered by the law. No shadow of doubt whatsoever. But what also will not be covered is the use of emotional and psychological pressure. So if you're in a church or mosque setting, or if you're in a therapist chair and you're being told that you are sick, that you need curing, that you have to change, it's not physical violence, but it's a form of emotional and psychological pressure that is being used and does cause people great distress.
But what about the question of sin? Is the Catholic Church allowed to teach that certain sexual activities are sinful? Indeed, all sexual relations outside marriage are sinful.
Yes, that is not going to be covered by the law. It's only very specific, concrete attempts.
But if the priest says that from the pulpit, isn't that a coercive, because it's attempting to persuade people to follow the teaching of the Church, and that is clearly trying to influence people's behaviour?
Yeah, but the law would only apply to specific individuals. So if someone makes a generic statement that homosexuality is wrong and people should repent, that will not be covered by the law. It'll only be if they take someone who is gay and sit them down and seek to pressure and persuade.
What if somebody goes to confession and confesses to a sexual sin? Is the priest allowed to say that is a sin and that they should sin no more when they leave, in the standard words of the of forgiveness that the priest reads out, because they are telling somebody not to repeat what they have repeated?
That will not be covered. It's attempts to change someone's sexual orientation. And the change has to be specific, it has to be concrete, it has to show that it is putting that person in undue pressure and circumstance that makes them feel distressed and anxious, and indeed may provoke real psychological harm. Because some people who've been through these practices, the mild ones that we're just talking about, they have ended up with very severe depression, and some have attempted self-harm.
But this goes back to the conversations that may be held within families. Are you allowed to say to a child that, no, I'm not going to call you by another name, I'm going to carry on calling you by the name that I called you when you were born? Is that coercive?
No, but that is not about changing someone's sexual orientation. That's a separate issue.
But the gender orientation is going to be included in this?
Yes, gender orientation will, sexual orientation and gender identity will be included, but it won't cover things like pronouns or the expression of opinions. But it will only cover attempts to change someone by using, psychological, emotional pressure and worse.
Isn't not getting along with somebody an effort to change them because you're not accepting what they have chosen to do? And that therefore this makes it very difficult for families to have an open conversation because they will be worried about crossing this boundary when there are quite clear laws on the abusive coercion already. That would be my concern, that I don't want people to be bullied or treated badly. I want people to be free to live the lives they choose to lead. But I also think that freedom of speech is very important, and uncertain children need to be protected and need to be able to have an open conversation with their parents, or indeed with their priest, with their pastor.
Absolutely, of course. There are already more than 25 countries or regions or states within countries that have banned conversion therapy. And none of them have had any of these problems because they give freedom of speech protections. So I think that this is an anxiety that is not founded in fact, and I do not believe we will go down that road. So we've got the Australian state of Victoria, which has an excellent model that works well. We could adapt that without any fear that parents would be intimidated or threatened by the law.
All right, well, thank you very much, Peter. I think we always have the most civilised conversations, though we probably disagree quite a lot. Thank you for coming in.